Welcome everybody to another edition of CII Delhi's webinar series. I have an amazing and awesome panel with us. Thank you so much everybody for being here and joining us. I know one of the big silver linings of this entire COVID experience is being able to get such very busy, great personalities with me in one single conference, almost impossible due to geographies and time schedules to put together panelists like this. So guys, thank you so much for joining me. An absolute pleasure. We're just waiting for our attendees to join. And, big question, guys, how's it going out there? Where are you? What are you doing? Anant Nath, why don't we start with you?
Guys, hi guys, hi everyone. Thanks, Adi, for organizing this one. Well, things are, of course, we'll talk about it, I guess, when we get to it. But things are, I guess, as muted as they can be. I'm in Delhi. Things are, we're all waiting for the big announcement in the next few days. Let's see what happens in the next week.
Brilliant. Abhijay, how about you?
Yes, hi. So I'm located in Jalandhar, and apparently Punjab is a big hotspot, and Jalandhar being the NRI belt, so that's how we got COVID in Punjab. People flew in from Spain, Italy, and it was a nightmare. And right now, lockdown, the entire premises office has been shut down, so everyone's working from home. But we are all in good health, so that's what everyone can hope for. I'm so glad, and I hope everyone's safe out there.
Brilliant. Anant ji, give me a second. I'm going to unmute you. I know your Zoom is having a little bit of issues there. There you go. Go for it, sir.
No, I mean, I think same, yeah. Bombay is a crazy, it's a very, very severe lockdown in Bombay. And I live in Narman Point. It's a business area. So not very easy to get access to things like your groceries and stuff. So I've tried to drive every 3 or 4 days to go and pick up, and I get caught by the cops, and I've been almost arrested, I think 2 or 3 times for like leaving the area, and I can't convince them that I actually need to go to get vegetables. So it's quite, it's been entertaining to live this piece. But
we live in interesting time, guys. Great. So we have, our initial participants in 140 plus. Great, everybody. Thank you for joining us. We still have a lot of people joining in. We'd love to take your questions, which are on topic. This is not the time to ask why my subscription was not renewed, or, my refund check has been pending. So on topic questions are more than welcome. And I'll make sure that we go through them as quickly as possible. I'm just going to unmute everybody just because, I think your backgrounds are reasonably silent. So we'll be fine. Right, so, one big thing, which if you can just take a minute, and I'd love, obviously all 3 of our panelists are well known, but, in your own words, can you just a little bit walk through us the scope of all the media properties and all you look at? I know that's supposed to be my job, but every time I start listing stuff for all of you, I realize I always leave out a bunch. So just, you can just take, like 30 seconds to a minute. Aditya, do you want to start off perhaps? Just,
Sure.
Beyond the Indian Express and Financial Express, what else does
Sure.
the group cover?
No, so we have the Indian Express and the Financial Express. We've got Lok Sakta, which is one of the largest regional titles in the country. One of the largest papers in the city of Bombay is our Marathi daily Lok Sakta. Jan Satta is our Hindi title, which is primarily Lucknow, Chandigarh, Kolkata, obviously Delhi. And we have a magazine called Lok Prabha, which is a weekly Marathi magazine. And all of this kind of merges in with our digital piece, which is now 6 languages. So aside from all these languages, we're doing Bangla, Tamil, and Malayalam. And together we're reaching about 140 million uniques a month across the world in 6 languages. So that's our landscape.
Brilliant. Thank you, Sonia. Abhijay, over to you. Major papers, of course, old Punjab Kesari in Punjabi, physical copies. Beyond that,
Yeah, so basically we are a group of four newspapers. So Hindi, Punjabi, and Urdu. We have Punjab Kesari spanning from New Delhi to Haryana, Himachal, Punjab, Jammu and Kashmir, and then we have Navodaya Times in NCR and Uttarakhand, which is our Hindi newspaper there. We have the Punjabi newspaper in Punjab, and the Urdu newspaper is circulated in different cities throughout northern India. But I think we ventured out about in 2010 into digital properties, and now we mostly focus on social media because our focus is to provide people with factual news. We have almost 25 different Facebook pages and channels, which are also there on YouTube. We almost, reach out to, we get almost 800 million video views a month on all those properties. But the users that we have on our platform span to 20 million unique readers every month on our platforms, which include Punjab Kesari, iPhone application, Android application, and all that stuff. That's about our media business, but the rest of businesses are go out of span out of this topic, so I will leave it to here.
No, brilliant, thank you. Over to Anant, and I'm so sorry for going Anant at the end of the day, otherwise I have to keep saying your full names. Anant, so Anant has, of course, Delhi Press. If I ask Anant to list out every magazine they have, that would be the entire web conference. Just a quick briefing of the major exciting ones, and whatever numbers you can share.
Sure. So we are primarily a magazine publishing house. We've been in magazine publishing for the last 80 years. So the magazine, some of the popular titles, of course, the one is Caravan. But besides Caravan, we publish a host of magazines which are in women's interest, children's interest, general interest. We publish about 30 magazines in all. The more famous one besides Caravan is Champak, which I hope everybody has sort of read at some point in their life. So that's my other calling card. More than Caravan, Champak. And to add some spice to it, there's a magazine called Manohar Kahaniyan, which is all about true crime. Again, a very old gritty magazine on sensational crime. So that's the mix of magazines. We have, of course, some women's magazine. We publish the largest read women's magazine in Indian language called Greh Shobha. There's a magazine called Sarita. So therefore, a mix of magazines. We're running about 6 websites. Together, the magazines and the websites do a readership of about 30 million. The websites would be about 20 million a month, and magazines would be another 20 million. There'll be some overlap, and also, overall, we would have a combined readership of 30 million. So that's the portfolio.
Thank you, sir. And thank you, all of you, from saving me from having to memorize and read all of those introductions out. Right, so for our audience who's joining, welcome, everybody. Please use the Q&A tab to ask questions. We want this to be interactive and audience driven. So our focus is to make sure that we cover this. But this is an amazing and large topic. And so I'm going to jump right into it. One of the big first questions, of course, if we were to meet 3 months ago, we could still have had a massive conversation on the future of journalism. We've had 5-10 years of major disruptions. Everybody has tried all across India and the world to see what's happening. And so just to kick off, and we'll go through all those complicated problems, but just to kick off, I mean, in your perspective, what is the state of the journalism business model? And we are going to try to stick to a lot more of the publishing and the business side of it, because that allows us to see how the ecosystem works. With the loss of ad revenues, people trying lots of different things. How has all of that impacted the ecosystem pre-COVID? And then we'll talk about a little bit of what's happening in COVID, and then we'll move on to the post-COVID world. Anant Goenka, would you like to get us started on that, please?
Sure. No, Sadi, you probably know this, most probably know this, that in India traditionally, nobody's ever really paid for news content. It's always been sort of paid for by advertising. Now, whenever there's economic uncertainty, the first thing to scale back, the first expenditure that people scale back is advertising. Numbers that I saw just last night, so far already, the hit on advertising towards journalism all over the world has been over $20 billion. That's an enormous amount of money to already have sort of, gone away from from journalism. I'm not talking about advertising overall. I'm just saying just advertising linked to journalism. So it's a completely unprecedented situation. The business model for journalism and for good, honest, independent news and content was always something which, was, I think, too ad dependent. We've taken a long time. For instance, I always say that, the Indian Express is being sold for 6 rupees. It should be sold for 14 rupees, 15 rupees every time we sell you a newspaper copy. And we keep trying to push that price up because every time anybody sells a newspaper, they lose around 4 to 5 rupees, per sale. So I think that had to get fixed, that had to get corrected, but it could have been a user support plus ad support, but now suddenly completely, all advertising seems to be, put on hold. So I think it's forcing us to come up with, ideas and, new revenue models and focusing on trying to get the customer to actually pay. And I hope we emerge out of this, with some, with a significant share of revenue coming from the actual reader. I hope we can all innovate towards that.
Brilliant, and thank you so much. Vijay, let's bring you in on this one.
I agree with Anant on the front that, the entire advertisement has been wiped out during COVID. See, we were already looking at that in US and then specifically in the Western countries where people have all these big newspapers have shut down their print operations and they have moved on to their digital operations. What we were before COVID, pre-COVID, what we were expecting that according to us, we had 5 years before the transition would have taken place. But apparently due to COVID, I feel that transition time has shortened down to about 2 years. And it is absolutely inevitable that everything moves to digital. But the thing is that there isn't any revenue in digital. And for good stories to come out, you need good journalists. And good journalists don't come, as a businessman, if I talk about it, they require a lot of money to do investigative stories. A lot of resources are required to do good journalism. And I feel Indian audiences do realize that, but they haven't come to the terms with the fact that they will have to pay for this. In India, apparently, news has always been considered something free of cost. यार ये तो free में मिलता है. ये free में जो मिलता है is not going to be the future of journalism in India, at least. And I think whether we agree with the fact or not, but every single newspaper organization, not newspaper only, but news organization, including TV channels, digital news organizations, will have to move towards a subscription model. Otherwise, we will end up going down a hole which leads to unethical and very extremely biased journalism. So, for example, you'll see a lot of, we were talking earlier, so a lot of native content has started coming up. The reason why native content is being given this space is because the news organizations aren't earning money from their subscribers. So they have to compensate for that by selling content. And selling content means it's never going to be the same again for journalism.
Anant, Nath, sir, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think I'm going to second both what Anant and Abhijay said. I think we were looking at the problem anyway. We were staring at the problem even before COVID happened because publishing has been going through a very difficult time over the last 4 years. Advertising dollars have been shifting to digital. So even though almost all publishers, all newspapers have big websites, but you're primarily relying on advertising for revenue generation. I mean, the silver lining out here probably is that, and I'm again seconding what Anant and Abhijay said, that the model has to shift towards greater emphasis on reader revenues. And the good thing is ecosystem is changing where people are becoming used to pay for good content. And there's some research to say that, countries which, if you step away from news for a second and look at content per se, countries that move towards higher revenue base or higher customer base for people who are willing to pay for audiovisual content will make a faster transition towards even paying for news content. So the fact that we are paying for Netflix, the fact that we are paying for Amazon or Hotstar or even Audible or, in smaller numbers, people, or even the new TRAI regime where people are made to pay for channels on a specific basis rather than a bouquet. People are getting used to pay for content. And it's only a matter of time before newspapers and magazines have to move to that model. For that, one big thing has to change is we have to up our game of journalism, because till the time you could give free newspaper, which was 3 rupees. I mean, I'm calling it free because it is free. The resale value is higher than, or is almost equal to the value of the paper you buy. Till the time you were giving free news, you could get by with some good journalism and a lot of other journalism. Now that you'll probably be forced to ask people to pay for it. Either, we're talking about digital primarily. The game of journalism has to be upped. So in a way, there might be a silver lining up there. I agree Abhijay's point that people are used to not paying for content, but that's also maybe because, we need to introspect and see whether are we giving content that they will pay for. So it's both ways.
I think, Anant, we are giving content which we want. So, for example, I'll just talk about even a simple story during COVID, that one of my journalists is going out and showing the entire public of what a lockdown actually looks like, and then going out to discuss with the authorities and administration of what are the steps, and doing a graphical representation on that. Now, so if we segregate this entire sequence into how the production is done, the graphical series itself is a very expensive thing, right? So you need licenses to do the animation. You have to have a very good grade A editor who can actually create that content, and then a journalist who actually understands the flow of how things are being done by the administration to put it in the paper or put it on digital, right? Everything costs a lot of money. I think Indian publishers have been providing good content. For example, let's talk about the Indian Express or the Hindu, or for that matter, Times of India. They have invested heavily in content, and they're actually doing a fantastic job at covering things up. But the fact that internal competition has led to the fact that we want more TRP, more audiences, and that competitive spirit has counteracted into selling that stuff at a low cost. It was a pure game of dominance, and that game of dominance is now backfiring in terms of revenues.
Let me push. Let me push back on something that Anant Nath said, and I'd love to get your guys' perspective on it. Right? Let us imagine a world, and I love what you said, and also your Freudian slip about covering up, but I'll let that go. But in the sense, if you are selling subscriptions, right? Mm-hmm. What you're essentially saying is that I need to become customer centric, yes. Right? Because at the end of the day, people only subscribe to you if they like what they are reading, if they like the quality of content.
Absolutely.
A converse argument could be made is that, and I'll use the example of the US journalism ecosystem, because a lot of what happens in India is maybe 3 years, 5 years delayed, and I think that's being compressed to maybe a year or so. But we can a little bit see where we are going, looking at what's happened there. And if you give people what they want to read, and we are seeing this happening, and I'll go through with you some numbers on this as well, but isn't there a danger that you end up having to morph your message to exactly what your readers want to hear? And I'll give you an example, right? The New York Times is one of the few papers in the world which has a massive subscriber base, right? I think they have been one of the winners in the digital subscription wars compared to almost all newspapers in the country. But there have been several instances where, due to subscriber pushback, they've had to change headlines, they've had to redo stories, they've taken positions which, because subscribers started yelling at them, they had to change. And so suddenly you're at the end of the day behest to your audience. Earlier we were behest to perhaps other influencers. Abhijay, your thoughts on that, and then to Anant Goenka, and of course back to Anant Nath, who kicked us off on this. Going to more subscription-oriented, more specific customer bases, does that mean you're going to have to, give exactly what your customers want? The customer is always right.
You're right about it. that a lot of news organizations are actually catering content around what their people want to read, right? But now there's an evolution theory about it, that you provide a recommended content section for your audience, so it is displayed to them of what they want to read, but then there's a separate section of what the news organization thinks should be read by the people. So eventually there will be a solution to that. There will be segregation to that. And I don't think that news organizations, especially the big ones who actually follow the ethics of journalism, will actually be unbiased or unethical about it. So that's why the entire industry of journalism revolves around is ethics. And a company which believes in ethical journalism will stick to that.
Anant Goenka, your thought?
I think, Adi, I think it's a great question. And I think you're absolutely right. I think if you look at both WashPo and NYT and, arguably, I mean, I'm sure people will reject this argument, but, I do think they kind of got in a bit of a trap, because the people who are subscribing to them are people who are, presumably really, really against Trump. Let's just say. So if you start,
or a certain demographic,
I'm just, now if you start catering to if you start, putting, just hypothetically, putting all the right-wing sort of opinions as, NYT WashPo opinions, will that piss off the subscriber base, And I think there's no doubt the answer is yes, it will, So is this helping journalism? I think what's happened is, I think this trend is new. I think that it will correct a little bit if you think that it has, if you think it's pushed, news brands even more to their respective sides. I think I do hope and pray that it is a temporary trend. I do think it will correct. Certainly, I think in India, we have benefited from the fact that we don't have this, left-wing, right-wing kind of, very clear separation. At least I don't think that it's as extreme as it is, in the West. I think we generally are, we like to be generally an objective country and objective society. And we're generally centrist. So I think that what we have to be very clear, what we're selling is authenticity, is domain expertise. I think that's what, COVID has done. I think COVID has shown, the world that, the audiences want domain experts now. I think they are recognizing that there is a difference between, treating your child, on a WhatsApp forward versus, picking up the New York Times or the Indian Express or whatever, and trying to find an authentic source of news and information which is actually relevant to you at that particular time. So I think crises like this, and I think COVID especially, has shown that audiences are saying, "Yeah, I'm done with this. I'm quite fed up of the crazy amount of explosion of content. I just want to know what's real, authentic, and I don't want to know more." And I think the fact that there is so much of excess news and information, a lot of it inaccurate, a lot of it biased, a lot of it motivated, I think that's pushing. I hope, maybe I'm being too optimistic, but I hope that's pushing audiences towards seeking, a good, authentic source. And one second thing, I'll just say that I do think as an industry, we have had it quite good for quite a long time. 400 plus news channels around the country. I wonder how many of those 400, what is the percentage of those 400 news channels who do nothing but journalism? What percentage of those news channels are actually in the business for, some other side advantage? And that's really why they're actually, on air. So I think, situations like this, I hope, separate the grown-ups from the kids. People are really serious about doing this, who are serious about doing this for the right reasons. I hope that this, forces that kind of filtration to happen in our industry.
And thank you. And by the way, everybody, thank you so much for all the people who are joining us. We are taking questions. Please push your questions in the Q&A tab. If you could click on it and put your questions there. On point, fantastic questions are very well appreciated. We have covered some of them accidentally, but we will pointedly look at some of them in the next few minutes. Anant Nath, to you on this. Will focusing on a subscriber base force newspapers, magazines to start only expressing the views that their subscribers like, or covering those stories from those angles.
Right. So fundamentally, I think there is nothing wrong with, giving your customers what they want. I mean, otherwise, why will they pay? I mean, at the end of the day, newspaper or a magazine is a product. It's supposed to serve a certain purpose. And, you got to sort of serve a purpose that the customer is looking out for. So fundamentally, there's nothing wrong with serving that purpose. I think it's important for every newspaper or publication for that matter to sort of keep in mind what customer are they serving and therefore what they're serving. So I don't know on what grounds were New York Times and Wall Street Journal, were they called out? I mean, was it because of factual inaccuracy, because of sensitivity or so? I mean, so I don't have the details about that. See, if a newspaper or a publication is called out for factual inaccuracy or for some other, errata, there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, in fact, honest journalism, it's impossible for any publication to put out a newspaper or a magazine free of error. You can't do it. It's impossible. So the honest thing for you to do is to accept where you went wrong and correct it. I think there is great intellectual honesty and humility. And as a publication, everybody should follow it. So there's nothing wrong with being called out and for being honest about it and accepting it and correcting it. That's the nature of business always. Circling back to what customers want. Generally, news customer. I mean, even since we talk about New York Times a lot, New York Times over the last 5-8 years has expanded well beyond news as their only service. I mean, we all know about New York Times crossword puzzles. We all know about cookery apps. Now they are giving their customers, they're identifying greater, significant audience groups, their interests, and serving them content which is beyond the narrow lens of news. So when we look at journalism or publishing for that matter, I think sometimes we do the mistake of only looking at it from the narrow lens of political journalism. There's far more beyond, above and beyond that. And yes, we as publishers have to sort of give our customers what they want. If somebody wants a rabid right-wing or left-wing view from us, I mean, and that's what we believe in. If you believe in it, then, you're serving your constituency by doing it, but you should be upfront about it. I mean, there is nothing wrong in being ideologically inclined at a certain, have a certain position, but be honest about it. And as long as you're not trying to force opinion, I mean, and then of course there's a thin line between concocting facts and arguing for a certain position. Arguing for a certain position is completely fine, but concocting facts is wrong. And nobody will disagree with that. So therefore, I mean, I'm just circling back to the original question. Do we need to give customers what they want? Yes. I think we need to all sort of figure out who are customers, what are we offering them, and get into a contract with them. And the stronger contract we get into them, the better will be our revenue models, because they will only pay us if we are fulfilling a fundamental need at their end.
And if I can just jump in and make just to support what Anant Nath was saying, is that, I think this is the service that I think New York Times and the Wall Street Journal kind of organizations have done, is that, they're very, very, they don't have that, they're very particular about getting their facts right. Even if you find them disagreeing with you ideologically, they will push it in they'll be so perfect about their facts, as opposed to a lot of the right-wing, news outlets there, who tend to be a little bit more, chalta hai, but let's get the opinion out, which will agree with the audience rather than make sure that dot the I's and cross the T's. I think that culture is something that I think that, we must try as best as we can to import,
So, I'm going to give an option here, right? So all of you run a wide variety of different brands. Not everything is called your masthead is differentiated by language, by region, by audience. Is the future of media publications in segmentation? So, for example, of course, the only sort of thing to a global conglomerate we've ever had really has been, historically Hearst, or now the modern version, Rupert Murdoch and the media empire. But does it mean that it is okay for the same media group to own, let's say, 3 different newspapers, one targeted towards one demographic, one towards another, maybe all 3 of them disagree with each other, but as Anant Nath said that each has a social contract to their readers. Is that viable? Is that something that people are exploring?
Let me add on to that. I mean, I think in terms of financial viability, I don't know will it make sense or not for newspapers, but as news websites, digital, it might. And like he said, so if we are providing content, so if someone wants to get, wants to watch food content, definitely we're going to provide them with food content. If someone wants to watch travel content, we have a separate channel for that. Segregation is important because everyone has a different hobby or a different interest, right? We can't just force political news onto someone who wants to watch sports or wants to enjoy comedy, right? So there has to be segregation for that. Just like we have segregation in terms of cuisine, right? We don't serve Thai food on an Indian dinner, right? So there are different cuisines, and that's the very reason why they have been named as cuisines. So similarly, we are going to have cuisines, which I'm going to use as metaphor for this conversation, in terms of reader content. But how viable is it financially is something that needs to be explored. But yes, it's quite doable and it's being done, definitely.
Just quick to add to what Abhijay is saying was, I think, as long as we bring the same sort of values of authenticity, of accuracy in our, food recipes as we do to our political coverage, I think, why not? You can compete, and we must expand. I mean, as Anant Nath was saying, now in New York Times expanded. I mean, the parenting section is outstanding. So I think things that the definition of news obviously is pushed a lot in the digital world, and I think I would love to embrace that. Obviously, financial issues aside, but I think what's unsustainable is, as a culture, I don't think I don't think anywhere in the world it's happened, and I don't know, I could be proven wrong here, but where the same news or the same owner, the same owning entity, on the one hand publishes, say the New York Times, and on the other hand also Rush Limbaugh or Fox News. It just doesn't. I don't know. I don't see how that can actually sort of happen.
And is that because it's the anger of the readers that you have to be true, you have to be authentic to our mission, and we won't tolerate if you're sort of double dipping?
I think the whole reader side of it is very new. So I don't think I can, I don't think there's any precedent to really prove either way. But no, I think more, culture is such an important thing, and I feel like every year when I review the year that's gone past, I always feel like culture has played such an important role, and I'm always surprised as to how important role culture has really played. So I mean, I'm sure for instance, if we if you found a company where there were such two completely polarized new setups operating under the same sort of wide roof, somebody in the organization itself will get pissed off, so much so that it'll become almost dysfunctional.
So it's also the internal politics between the organizations.
I think so.
Right?
I think so. I think it's a cultural issue. I don't think you can.
Absolutely.
Journalists are passionate people about their causes, no matter what side of the aisle or the
as they should be. As they should be.
Anant Nath, you run 30 plus magazines. Obviously, you guys have sort of mastered having a lot of content. Everything from ultra high end marquee flagships to some which are perhaps very different. Let's just say that. How do you manage this culture between these 30 different publications?
Are
there fistfights?
Sure. No, there aren't, because the magazines sure have a very different content offering and looking at very different audiences, but they're not. In no instance, we have the situation that you were trying to paint, that we are on the opposite side of ideology. So all the magazines, either these are magazines where ideology doesn't need to really have a very important bearing. I mean, a crime magazine, frankly, is a crime magazine. A political ideology has very little space there. An automotive magazine,
tabloid ghost stories.
I mean, sure. So automotive magazine again is an automotive magazine. Political ideology per se will not have a very big bearing on it. So either the underpinning of political ideology is very, very muted, or for that matter, it's not relevant. Or if there is then these are all publications which are on the same side of a certain value system. Let's put it that way. So that clash is not there. But I mean, there is one example that we had in India where, and we still have that example, I guess. I think there are exceptional example. It's an exceptional example. I mean, Times of India is a behemoth, and they at one point you could see Times Now and Mirror Now. Although Times Now was a much bigger channel, but even then, they were on the opposite sides of political and cultural debate. So these exceptions are there, but they are exceptions. I think I agree with what Anant was saying, Goenka, that it's difficult to manage. I mean, who are you trying to please? I mean, if government is an important constituency you're trying to please, then it doesn't make sense to have a small channel that is anti-government. It will come back to bite you. Eventually, it will come back to bite you. If your readership, I mean, I guess readers look at media products very individually. At least I can say for our publication house that for each publication, the public, for each readership is the publication matters, not the publishing house. So if you can sort of segment publications in a manner, or whatever, your media properties in a manner that they are the primary interface, I think that's what matters to them. So it's the internal clash that might be a bigger thing to handle. I could imagine that. I mean, if an organization can handle it, then great. I mean, it will be difficult, I would imagine, as well.
I do think it really comes down to authenticity. Like there's one line where you have a business manager telling the editor that, look, you're going to sell more subscriptions if you take this line. Versus a very organic disagreement that happens so often, for instance, between, the editorial line on an issue that Lok Satta Marathi paper will take compared to Indian Express will take. It happens at least 2 or 3 times a year. It really, Financial Express and Indian Express have disagreed so many times editorially. But that doesn't matter to anybody because we recognize that we're coming from genuine places where the objective is to be honest to yourself and to really, back up your facts and have a healthy argument. In fact, we encourage opinions and disagreements. But I think it becomes problematic when the business model, as Anant rightly said, is let's have one channel that will please the government and another channel that will make the government, that will question the government. And so, that I think gets confusing. But you know what? Anant, who are we to say anything here? The kind of money that, those guys, so maybe, who knows? maybe we don't.
The most unfortunate part, I would like to add on is that why it's in India that we are worried about the government, So what I believe Aditya meant was, having a publication which talks about people who are more left-sided versus a publication having who talks about right-sided people. It doesn't mean that it has to appease government in that sense. It's just carrying out the views of people. But I think the Hindu does that very well in its opinion page, where like they put for the same argument, they have 3 different sections. So they have a left view, they have a center view, and they have a right view. So they managed to do that in the same newspaper. And I believe Indian Express is a pioneer in carrying every section's viewpoint. So I read a lot of leftist and a lot of right people, a lot of center opinions in Indian Express. I think we guys are doing very well in our existing publications. It's just we need to figure it out if there's huge enough audience that wants to read more of those opinions and then maybe create content for them. It just doesn't have to be around the fact that we have to appease government. But unfortunately, that's something that comes along with it in India, at least. That's where we have fallen in terms of freedom of speech index worldwide. We have fallen quite a bit on that front. But I believe it's possible. We are doing that in our existing papers.
And Abhijay, I'm also going to point out the opposite, that there are lots of sort of journalistic outfits which are, just trying to market the fact that they're so against the government. वो भी होता है, उल्टा भी होता है, so, you're right.
No matter what the government does right, they're wrong.
Yeah. Like, why is the government so central to what we're doing? I think you're absolutely right. It's a great point.
Yeah.
First, I would like to take this opportunity to publicly apologize for Anant Nath's comment that automotive journalism has no ideology battles.
No. Political. That's twisting the statement. I said political ideology will have a very little bearing. Ideology is very important. I mean, those machines are very important machines. I beg to differ there now. People are passionate about those machines.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, so, I'm going to take this to a thing. Do you think journalism as a business, as a, okay, so what we've looked at, we've looked at segmentation of audience, we've looked at, journalistic contracts with audiences, we've looked at breaking news models. A lot of people have said, look, fundamentally, we need to reboot journalism around the world. And guess what? And only non-profits can be journalists, right? And we need to sweep away all private organizations who are doing journalism because they're going to fall prey to market forces. They're going to fall prey to these contracts with their subscribers. What we need are either a bunch of billionaires, Jeff Bezos and all, coming in, buying out entire outfits and saying, look, I'll put a trust fund for you, or various. I mean, The Economist can be considered one of those examples where you have a trustee board and all running. There's no promoters. There's nobody sort of behind the scenes really doing it, and they sort of have a general mission. Do you think non-profits are the way to go for journalism in the future, or is that overrated? Or quite frankly, what are the issues with that? Anant Nath, starting with you, sir.
No, so, sure. I mean, news business is no longer as profitable as it used to be. I mean, at one point, news business was immensely profitable. I mean, world over. Those days are gone. Those days won't come back easily. There are various. I mean, the challenges, of course, we all know of. So, to be able to do a truly independent journalism, has become more difficult. Online, internet was supposed to sort of help content creators. Conversely, internet has sort of turned the tables around against the content creators. I mean, there's a fascinating book I read on how, at the dawn of the millennium, 2000, writers, producers, music artists, everybody thought that, okay, now that internet is there, we don't need the middleman. We don't need the musicians thought that we don't need the music label. Writers thought we don't need the publisher. We can directly write or create content, go to the reader, go to the content producer, consumer, and make money. It hasn't happened because internet, the way it is, whether it's Google or Amazon or Facebook, it champions, or YouTube, it champions few. Whoever does better gets more readership. Whoever is middle of the rung, in fact, gets pushed down. So therefore, it's become a winner takes all. I mean, like digital is. So therefore, back in the day, you could have a small magazine, or newspaper for that matter, which did independent journalism, made enough money from subscriptions and advertisers, and maintain a small but important existence. Internet has disrupted that. I mean, it's almost impossible unless you have viewership in millions and millions. You can't make money from advertising. Even then, to sustain the kind of content creation for getting those millions of views, it doesn't work out. So digital, which was supposed to be a savior, or which was thought to be a savior for independent content creation, has actually ended up being an adversary. Therefore, the non-profits have stepped in. Therefore, the billionaires have stepped in to save journalism. I feel it's a stopgap arrangement. It's not a sustainable arrangement, of course, like everything else, because sooner or later that money might dry out. I mean, there are some examples. I mean, Guardian is a very important example where we see that donations have raised enough money for making the paper almost viable. I mean, they were almost. I mean, I know they were in a fairly difficult financial position a few years ago. At this point, they seem to have turned the financial tables around. But can it be a recipe for everybody? No. I mean, eventually you will have to sort of figure out a way that you use that as a crutch, but figure out a profitable or even a viable model, which eventually will come back to reader revenue. So there is no other way out. I mean, advertising will just not work for you digitally.
Anant Goenka, non-profits as taking the lead, everybody out.
No, I completely agree with what Anant Nath said, is that, look, it's not a sustainable idea. The benevolent billionaire at some point will either lose his benevolence or will lose his billions, right? His or her billions. And I think that, as he absolutely rightly said, these are stopgap arrangements. And I think there is a space for it. I think there's a lot of, especially foundation-funded sort of content that happens in America, the MacArthur Foundation, the Knight Foundation, they do great stuff, outstanding content. But I do think, again, culturally, it starts pushing us, to the fringes. Again, we start losing the center of market sort of hold that we have if we go down that path. Because I don't think you can get away from the fact that what we need to do is we need to create original, intelligent, authentic content, and find a way to produce it, package it in a way that people will want to consume it. There's a nice line, and I can't remember who said it, and we say it around in the newsroom a fair bunch, is that, the idea that, we are paying journalists to write, that whole idea has to change now to, the fact that you are not being paid to write, you're being paid to be read. I think that is a huge, again, cultural shift that we have to sort of, there's no point, there's no point ticking the box that you've done XYZ story because it was important. Yes, you went to Mantralaya, you sweated, and you did the story. Fine. I don't think that's going to fly anymore. I think you have to invest in production. You have to invest in the kind of animation. If you look at what Vox does, it's such brilliant journalism, but, just packaged in such a wonderful way, things that, the stories are out there to be read, but just how they've told those stories is so gripping. Is it sustainable as a business? So far, not, right? I mean, Vox has been struggling, but I think that we have to find a way to make that sustainable. And I don't think there's any getting away from that. And again, we have to lean on the subscriber to pay for it.
Abhijay, and then we're going to transition to a lot of the questions that we have.
I absolutely agree with both the Anants. They're absolutely on point about the fact that, non-profit, the whole story, it's all flawed. I mean, if it was true, then we wouldn't be, I wouldn't name these organizations, but I hope you guys understand. There's a news organization which is, owned by a billionaire in India, and they ended up firing 50% of the staff, and because they said they aren't getting any revenues. So it's not, he acquired the news organization on the fact that he's helping out journalism, but apparently, like Anant Nath said, the money is going to dry up. It has dried up in this case, and if not to name another name, but there's a state-owned organization in the West which has resorted to several unethical means of gathering money, even though they are getting hundreds and millions of dollars in payment from the taxpayers to be run. So, I mean, these are pure case studies which tell us that it's not a sustainable thing for journalism. It is eventually going to stop, and when it stops, it is going to be bad for both the readers and as well as the fraternity, the journalism fraternity, because they are going to taint it so badly that there would be a return thing. You can't go back to it.
No, perfectly understand.
I just want to add, Adi, one thing here. I mean, when I say that non-profit as a stopgap arrangement, that's not to sort of question the legitimacy of non-profit or billionaires for that matter. There are enough examples on how either philanthropist billionaires or noble-minded billionaires for that matter, or non-for-profit have helped sustain or give life to independent journalism. I mean, under Jeff Bezos, Washington Post has become only stronger. And if he hadn't sort of, there's enough literature out there how WAPO has become just a stronger newspaper. So much so even New York Times, they had to sort of sell a majority stake, or not a majority stake, a significant stake to the Mexican billionaire, who got a board seat. But the structure was such that, there was no editorial interference. And the Mexican billionaire, or Carlos Slim, I think was the name, right?
Yes, Carlos.
It was a lifeline. And had that lifeline not been there, we probably would not have New York Times today, and world would be not such a, great place in terms of journalism. I mean, New York Times is an institution to be preserved. And the good thing about Sulzberger family is that they don't see it as their paper anymore. It's the world's newspaper, and, it had to be preserved. Same for WAPO. If Jeff Bezos had not stepped in, we would not have had WAPO the way it is right now. So, not questioning the intentions or the need for philanthropy billionaires or non-for-profit, but it cannot be sustainable journalism. It has to make money for itself, and we can see again from New York Times and WAPO's case, both of them are now financially viable papers, thanks to the lifeline they had sort of gotten.
So I'm going to pivot a little bit. And I'm going to pick up a whole bunch of 4 or 5 questions and sort of smish them together. And my apologies to those who've asked that I'm trying to paraphrase all your questions together to a single theme. Newsroom of the future, right? And I have a couple of questions, a couple of anonymous ones, one from a Mr. Rajiv Malik. I have one from a Mr. Hari. I have 4 or 5 different questions on this, but all collapsed into one theme. What does the newsroom of the future look like? And particularly 3, 4 themes that have emerged. One, the high cost of sustaining large newsrooms, a large amount of reporters who have to now file often 2 or 3 stories a day rather than once every 10 days or 15 days, so the deep journalism thing. The second, the rise of freelancers, where we are all now looking at a huge number of journalists have gone freelance and they're working for multiple papers, and their role, how is that sort of transforming journalism, rise or fall there. Third, we had a lot of outfits, CNN, for example, did a massive push on this, is trying to bring in so-called citizen journalism, right? Where they are trying to say, look, we can't be there to cover everything. How do we get our, use this crowdsourced journalism thing to sort of pull in the stories that matter, and we act as the, the content cleanup, development, and publishing side. So what does, and starting with Abhijay, what does, in your opinion, the newsroom of the future look like? These 3 aspects, and of course more.
To be honest, it looks like this: work from home. So, I don't know, a lot of people who are attending this conference are not aware about the fact that about 2 weeks back, we had some COVID positive journalists in our organizations. And, now the tally is up to 20 people. All of them are very healthy. There wasn't any symptom. So 5 of them have recovered very nicely and they are all in full health. But because of that, we had to shut down the entire premise, and we have more than 500 people working here. So all of them had to shift to their homes. We had to install, 500 internet connections, landline connections, because all the, dongles stopped working because everyone was using them. So the towers were choked up. So landline connections, computers being set up at homes. We had to set up mobile studios in our in houses for anchors. So now, it's a very good question, and it's the evolution of journalism, because now my anchor, who's also my political producer, has also become the cameraman himself. So 3 roles merging into one is the future of journalism. This entire episode is going to teach us how one journalist can actually create the content without the help of another one. We won't have any page makers for the paper or the compositors or anything. My editors are doing the page making, they are doing the designing, they are editing the news item, they're proofing the news item. So role of 4 into 1. The merger is the future of newsrooms. That's what I personally believe.
Abhijay, freelancers? More or less?
I think the freelancers have picked up quite a bit, and at least I'm not facing that kind of a problem in my region, because the freelancers here are not very ethical, in terms of their news coverage. Thereby, people have reverted back to news organizations like us for the authenticity of the news. For example, we have set standards in regards to crime coverage that we do. Unless and until there has been a registered FIR, we do not mention that in a newspaper, or for that matter, in any news outlet. But these freelancers, just to get TRP and audiences, they run the news item just on a complaint, which is a breach of privacy and also is unethical journalism, thereby putting the security of a particular citizen in danger. I can give you an example that there was this small blog in one of our cities, not specifically Jalandhar, but in one of the cities of Haryana. So this guy put out a news item that a citizen A of that specific city was a ISI agent. So people read that and went to his house, burned his house down, stoned him to death. And later on, the police realized, oh, he wasn't the suspected person. So, this is what will happen with independent journalists. Not as to say, I am saying bloggers, but not journalists. Someone who follows the ethics of journalism obviously is going to rise. I mean, we know the entire story with Huffington Post. It is now one of the biggest news organizations in the world. But there is a huge risk of unethical journalism being given birth by these fellows, by bloggers in these individual cities. This is something that we are facing in my region. I cannot comment on something like the metropolitans or where the literacy rate is very high and people are extremely ethical and they value human life. They value the privacy of a person, of the citizen. All these things do matter in terms of freelancers.
Abhijay, so what you're essentially saying is that, quality of freelancers matters a lot.
Yes.
And obviously your experience is in your region that perhaps there are not that many freelancers, 10 years of experience as journalists who become freelancers.
Yes.
They are usually lay people who are trying to, you would never hire them normally. And that's why they are freelancer, not because they've chosen the life of a freelancer. It's just that they're just so bad, no one would actually hire them in the first place.
I do hire freelancers, but we do check their background. We do check the work that they have done for the last 5 to 10 years. And we have a very strict recruitment policy where we do police verifications of every single person that joins our organization. So if there are certain complaints or certain there's a criminal background of a journalist, we do not hire them, because if they have done something in the past, they will definitely do that again. But this time with the influence of the organization, which will be definitely not acceptable to us.
Anant Goenka, sir?
No, I think the whole, sorry?
No, the future of the newsroom and freelancer,
I think
all this other stuff.
Yeah, no, I think, the last couple of years have shown that, you don't need to have 3 cameramen, a 3-person crew to report a basic sort of, city story. You've got to find ways to use your smartphones and, you can upload directly from that. You don't need OB vans like you did earlier. So all of that stuff, I think we've heard that enough. So I won't sort of go down that path. I think what, Abhijay is saying, and I'm just going to underline that, is that, again, that idea of credibility is so important to everything we do now. So it forces us to do 2 things. And this I picked up actually from Columbia, Anant's alma mater, but that, digitize and specialize. You have to be a domain expert, now to get paid for your content. So whatever that domain is that you want to, it could be just, Pakistan. So if you are the expert at understanding Pakistan's politics and Pakistan as there will always be a demand, whether it is television, whether it is print, whether it is a regional guy, an English guy, there'll always be a demand for you and your knowledge, your expertise. That's very difficult to buy. So you can always charge top dollar for that. So I'd say if you want to be freelance, if you want to, and even from a newsroom perspective, I think a newsroom of the future will be a newsroom of domain experts. We can leave the commoditized content to the wire services. We can leave the commoditized content to whoever is ranking on Google that day to give to our audiences. But if I'll give you an example. We've got a gentleman named Harish Damodran, in our newsroom. The last word on rural farmer issues. That whole area. Nobody can I think in the country really understands like he does. He's such an asset to to us. And there are many more, like that. In fact, he did a podcast. We have this very popular podcast, Indian Express's 3 Things podcast. Just went ballistic viral. 45-minute lean back audio format explaining, farmers' situation post COVID. Who would have thought? But that kind of value add that he brings, there is an audience for that. So audiences will come for domain authority. And that all comes back to what, we've been saying for a long time, is that, look, credibility is really all we have as news organizations. Let's break it down. What do we do, right? We create content. Today, anybody with a smartphone can create content. We create content every day. We print it. Now today, anybody can publish news and information. There's very little barriers to entry for that. We sell advertising. Google and Facebook today will sell advertising in a much more efficient manner than we ever can. So really, there are three operational things we do, but the fourth thing that we do, which nobody else can do really, is the fact that we've been doing all these three things for 180 years for Express, 100 years for many others, every day in and day out. So what we have done as a byproduct of doing these three things is that we have built a lot of credibility. We have built a certain a certain brand, a certain recall for authenticity, and that really is our only sort of competitive advantage. It's our only that barrier to entry to building that credibility. That I've got an 85-year start and before anybody else. So I think the only way we build on that sort of unique selling point that we have is by investing in domain authority and just people really know a particular area that we want to cover.
So essentially what you're saying is that, look, there's going to be a complete bifurcation of content. You have the commodity news, which, has to be covered. There's a press conference by the Prime Minister, key highlights have to be given. There's a major incident somewhere, and that the facts will come in, and then you'll have these spins, etc. But what really is going to make a difference, why people will come to your organization versus whoever's trending on the top on a news aggregator, then we'll come to news aggregators, is primarily driven by hardcore domain knowledge. That if I really want to know the issue, this newspaper, this magazine, this organization, this media outlet has somebody there who's going to give me a perspective that the run-of-the-mill commodity cannot do so.
Yeah.
Right? Anant Nath, sir, your thoughts, future of the news.
So the one thing I can pinpoint is that the importance and relevance of a very, very strong desk is becoming even more important, because we need domain experts. We need a lot of content coming to us, either through our own writers or freelancers. But besides the other things, what will distinguish credible news organizations or credible news organizations from other ones are the strength of the desk, the editorial desk, which will vet the content, make sure that all the arguments are well thought out, factually vet it, and then put it out. So as compared to 20 years ago, where your local newspaper was the only newspaper that you had access to, and therefore there wasn't much choice. I mean, you had to read the newspaper of your city, or maybe choose between the 2 or 3 newspapers that you had to choose from. And so therefore, just publishing news, I'm not saying the desk wasn't good at that time. I'm just saying that the importance of desk as compared to 20 years ago, 30 years ago, where it's important just to get news out, information out, as against now, where you are just one amongst them, frankly, thousands of other people who are giving you news. What differentiates you more than anything else is a desk. I can say that for ourselves, we are primarily a freelance-driven organization. I mean, most of the content that we publish is from contributors. We have a team of writers, both in Caravan and other magazines as well. But what they produce is probably it's not even it's only a percentage of the total content we put out. We have a far bigger freelance pool, but a very strong desk, and that's what distinguishes us, both in terms of style, editorial credibility and accuracy, and packaging. So that will continue to be the differentiator for all of us.
So I want to move to some of the questions that we have from the audience on credibility. I have one from a Mr. Rahul. There is a Mr. Manish Gulati, etc. around credibility. One thing, and perhaps, this is just my personal opinion, there's an error, is that we tend to club all journalist outfit into journalists, or we tend to club every newspaper, every magazine. And as Anant said, has Anant Goenka says like 400 plus news channels, God knows how many newspapers, and I won't even count the so-called online journalist blogs, etc., that have come up. Now, two things what we have seen, which have sort of broken the credibility and allowed a lot of people to make accusations which become hard to defend. One, we are seeing even in some of the prominent news organizations, we have a lot of rogue reporters. And these usually I've seen are either 2 to 3 years out of journalist school, suddenly for some reason, I won't name organizations, have gone from just as a trainee to a senior correspondent in 2 years or in 3 years, right? When that was reserved for someone with at least 10, 15 years of experience a while back. There are people who are sort of bloggers and are sort of freelancers and such. And there are also online platforms run on the sole purpose of extortion. One of the key takeaways from this conversation also is that, while we're all saying we should have strong desks and domain experts and all, this is very expensive. And for a lot of news organizations or who call themselves news organizations, perhaps being accurate, being factual, being good journalists isn't as important. So two-part question. One, how can news organizations in the country and as an ecosystem weed out these sort of bad rogue journalists, as we call them, or even extortion racket guys? And second, then of all, how do we, as a nation, try to start distinguishing between good actors and bad actors, even in the journalism sector, or is that even possible? Anant Goenka, starting with you, sir.
No, I think, it's only track record. Audiences have to make those distinctions. I don't think anybody can. I don't think as an industry, we can sit and point and say, this guy extorted, this guy didn't extort. I don't think that's our job. And I certainly don't think that the government should be, the arbiter really of that problem. So I think, we are relatively in a nascent. We're still in a fairly nascent place in our, in our entire media ecosystem. I think we have a lot of growing up to do, and I think these things will weed themselves out. And I think really the audiences. I keep saying this, and I think again, COVID is showing that, right? The audiences are very, very for the first time you'll see people thinking, okay, XYZ article has ended up on my phone or on my email. Where is it from before I read it and before I trust what I'm reading? So I think that sensitivity has to come from the audiences, and I don't think there is any solution to that really. And if it takes time, it does.
Abhijay, rogue reporters and how to clean up the ecosystem.
I think, like Anand said, that we are not responsible for what is going out in the country as a whole, because it's practically impossible to find rogue journalists like that. But on the other hand, I feel we are responsible for finding rogue journalists within our organizations, and we actively do every single day. Every single day we do that. Every single complaint that we receive, we do a thorough investigation. We have a panel of 4 to 5 senior journalists. Rather, they run the entire show. They go through the complaint and they investigate the entire story. And if there is anything that incriminates that specific journalist, we let go of that person. We take a very strict action, even though that means loss of business for us, because the way our organization came into being was as a social service for the country, but like we have discussed earlier, it had to be self-sustainable. But we do have very strong precautions on that front. But if you ask me if I can find a rogue journalist and do something about it, someone sitting in Goa, that it's practically impossible. Secondly, like Anand said, I don't think government should be responsible or should even intervene in this matter or in this process. I think this is very, very personal to the audience of that specific location or geo where they take action against such rogue elements in the society.
Anant Nath, sir, rogue journalists, how to weed them out?
Adi, do you mind while Anand answers that question if I just change my background for a second? I'm just going to step outside because I've been on webinars the whole day. So I'm going to take my laptop with me. But sorry if it distracts you all. I'm too nervous to stop the camera.
We will get a tour of your house, Anand. Go ahead, Anant Nath.
No, I think again, let the audience be the final judge. I think audience are smart. I think last 4 years we have seen that there is there's far more cynicism with what you see online. I mean, people are becoming more they ask questions. Where is this from? Who's saying this? I mean, it's if it takes a longer time, then so be it. I mean, let the audience be the final judge. No other organization or authority can be a judge on that. There was one point that you made that about young reporters being elevated. I frankly think, again, nothing wrong with that, because often the young reporters are the ones who are more ready to go out there. They have the greater hunger to sort of find a story out there. And unfortunately, we're living in a time where journalism is, or publishing is not profitable. So therefore, if you have a young reporter who can go out there, get his, hands dirty, get you a good story, you have to go with that. I mean, yeah, there's a certain risk involved, which is that there is certain maturity that comes in with age in terms of how to handle everything. So obviously that is important, and sometimes you can end up being a little brash in a wrong way, and that's where the desk comes in. Therefore you need to sort of balance it. They get a right desk, make sure that the desk asks the right question with
Absolutely.
each reporter. But get young reporters. They're far more agile. They're hungry, and they don't have the baggage of, the other thing all of us have seen, I'm sure in either your own organization or somebody else, is that sometimes senior journalists end up, making very good friends into the establishment, and they would not pursue stories that they should be pursuing. And this is the problem that everybody faces. The younger journalists would not have that problem. So therefore, so be it. I mean, it's survival of the fittest. If the young reporter is going to get his hands dirty and not going to care for his friendships because he or she doesn't have friendships in the first place, then you got to place your faith in that person. Make sure that the desk ensures that that person is analyzing everything right and getting right questions, not being brash, not being stupid, not being silly, not creating, theories which will fall in his face. And therefore the right, have a little more experienced desk, get young reporters, get freelancers to do stuff. That's going to be an important way that newsrooms might evolve.
But you know what? You have given a wonderful business idea to me as a this whole problem needs a solution, right? So, I mean, just like we have that app called Practo, where you can actually look up for doctors of specific nature and you can read the ratings, you can read about the work. There should be an app for the journalist as well. I mean, people can actually report about the journalist and what they have done and all that stuff.
Abhijay, that was actually going to be my next question. So you preempted that. But I'm going to pause on that. First, Mr. Goenka, love your background. It's totally real, which is great. Second, Anant Nath, I love what you're saying. So, young journalists have a great role to play. They're hungry. And who is to say just because you have a lot of experience doesn't mean you are rogue? You have a lot of establishment friends. Maybe you are sort of shilling on their behalf rather than truly creating an unbiased report. And, young blood brings in a lot of new perspectives as well. And particularly with the high technology focus, as Abhijay was saying, where you have to combine three or four roles into one. Having that in one place may not be a bad idea. And I think the young generation probably is a little bit more agile in terms of saying, okay, versus someone who has a lot of experience, but, they're learning how to use basic technology for the first time. And they're going to be a little bit more slower in adapting to that new reality. But to Abhijay's point, and then I'm going to move into some of the more interesting aggregation talk. And we have some brilliant questions on that as well. But, so my worry always is, right? And we've seen this across industries everywhere, where there is strong industrial self-regulation, right? There is an argument to be made that the government or third parties don't need to step in. And we've seen that in, lots of organizations, lots of industries around the world, right? Where there is always there is a hazard problem. A lot of people are saying perhaps, in journalism, the tipping point has come. And I've been hearing this from inside the government. I'm sure all of you have as well, that, maybe the government needs to step in to clean up, quote unquote, the ecosystem. Obviously, this is a terrible idea. This is the last thing that the journalism ecosystem needs, is the government to try to solve this problem of rogue journalists, of, people misleading with facts. We've had laws passed on everything from, oh, you can't forward WhatsApp information to, governments coming in. I mean, forget about private players using libel laws for good and for bad. But we've had governments coming in and saying, look, we are going to shut down reporting. We are going to arrest people. Local reporters going and FIR, and governments at all levels. It's just not central government, but states, down to municipal levels, down to even individual thanas, right? If the industry were to get together somehow and try to figure out a solution where it would self-regulate, would say, look, we can't have a rogue reporter just bouncing from one newspaper to the other. Abhijay, have you lost your video? Are you still with us?
Yeah, absolutely. I was just out for
brilliant, great. So, as let's say an organization like Abhijay, they receive a complaint against a rogue journalist, they fire him. That guy walks over and gets a job in some other paper as long as he can write well and such. If we were to create an industry body and, new one, there are a lot of old industry, Press Trust of India, all of this stuff, etc., which haven't stepped up to this. But if the industry were to collate together and create some sorts of self-governing structure, where perhaps not voting on it in public, but at least internally could mark out those who are the very extreme cases of rogue journalists, what would that look like? Starting with Anant Nath, what would that look like?
It's a very, very tricky subject. I think regulation is one subject that media has been grappling world over and not found a perfect answer. There is no perfect answer, first of all. Obviously,
what's a reasonable one?
No, I mean, reasonable one has some kind of self-regulation again. But again, the problem is, what is the whip that you can crack? If you sort of, let's say, Editors Guild of India is one such organization that has a code of conduct, code of ethics, or whatever, code of professional practice. Similar such organizations are there in UK and US. But unfortunately, there is not much in substance that you can crack as a whip. On any unethical practice, you can have a code of practice, and you can say that, okay, your members would abide by this code of practice. But what if the organization chooses not to be a member of that organization? And this is the fundamental problem. Why should you be a member of an organization if it does, that the incentives are fairly weak. It's a voluntary organization of journalists. It's not even of organizations for that matter. I mean, at least in Editors Guild of India, it's not even of organizations, it's people. And any kind of government backed model will just fall flat in your face. It's not even a starter, not even a conversation starter.
No, so let me propose something more specific, okay? And to go off a little bit of Abhijay's point and a little bit of other proposals that we've got. Let's say we have, the top 30, 40 news organizations of the country, all of you included, say that, look, we're going to together as publishers, not as editors or as individual journalists, come together and make some sort of new organization and say, look, we are not going to address all the cases. We are just here to address the extreme cases, the clear cases, where action has to be taken, and we will fund it, or we'll find some funding, etc. And if we have individuals or rogue journalists or reporters who have truly exhibited bad behavior, run through some reasonable process of doubt and such, but then, put a black mark against them and said, look, none of us will hire this person. None of us will publish their stories. They are deplatformed and blacklisted because of their poor behavior for, let's say, 3 years or something until they have shown a reform. Obviously, the bar to do that has to be very high. You can't do it on a normal case. It has to be very exceptional cases. Is there room for something like that?
Absolutely. I'm cutting you guys through, but I think absolutely there's a room for that. And I think it should be done because it's very feasible. I do agree with Anant Nath on the fact that it's very tricky, but I think tricky is fun. So I think if we start working on that front, I mean, we are definitely going to face a lot of challenges, but I think it's possible and it should be done because it's for the good of journalism and the future of journalism.
Anant, yes.
I haven't seen a model anywhere tried out, to be honest. That's nothing to say that you should not try a model, but I don't foresee it coming together because organizations that want to be part of this thing, let's say, you think of a body which is a self-governing, self-regulation body, and a organization is part of it, and one of their journalists has gone rogue, or whatever. I mean, has done something which is unethical. The mere fact that that organization has been a part of it, there's an inbuilt incentive that the organization will take action against that journalist, irrespective. They don't need to be, sure, they're answerable to a body, which is good, but in all likelihood, they might have taken an action themselves. But what if we're talking about an organization per se, which has a very different value system, and they don't believe, I mean, you're free to run your media. If let me take my example. If we want to run a certain kind of a news outfit that does not believe with that that collective body's ethos, I can still do it. I have the right to run my organization. I don't need to be part of that. That's not a compulsory organization to be part of. I can do whatever I want to do. How will you rein me in? So if media organization,
perhaps you have a buyer's, sorry, Anant, perhaps if it's a buyer's beware, if you know that that journalist has had that black mark against them, would you at least think twice before hiring them?
I somehow I find it very difficult to think that a system like this can be put together. I don't have the
no, of course, but
I find it very difficult something like this to come together. It's going to be so problematic. We can try it, but I don't see it coming through.
Anant Goenka, live from the free air of Bombay.
Clean air. No, listen, I'm wondering, is this, I don't know. I mean, I know this problem is larger in the regional space than it is in maybe the national English space. But I feel it's a small community. I think people who don't, I think if there's a particular reporter gone rogue, his name spreads quite fast all across the industry, and then who's going to hire him? And whoever hires him wants to hire him for whatever, reason. It's like telling you that, if you think of the newspaper like a car manufacturer, right? Would you want to know sort of whoever's working the shop floor, who's done a bad job, or who's sold off parts from the shop floor? It's a bad example. I should not have ventured down this road, but
absolutely, I want to know. I want my car to crash. Absolutely, I want that.
we will take this out in the post editing.
If my car is gonna crash, I will want to know about that. I do not want to be in my car.
No, your car won't crash, but I think Volkswagen or Maruti, whatever, is not going to want to hire a bad worksman.
I know. Right? But look at the entire with the diesel scandal that Volkswagen, the emissions.
But that was Volkswagen's doing. I mean, in the sense that management was clearly involved.
Will you want to hire that management who was responsible for such a massive scandal?
No, of course not. But then the brand, the company gets hit by that, right? So, so people stop buying Volkswagen when it comes out.
No, so I believe what Aditya is talking about is for an organization that regulates the quality of the people, of the journalists, and not the organization itself. So I think there's a certain confusion.
No. I feel like the organization needs to regulate who it hires, and
just like that of the way it's there for the doctors. I mean, Indian Medical Association, they are there. But the licenses are given to doctors to practice, and they do monitor.
Abhijay, I am not even going that far, right? I'm just saying that, look, if one good news organization has had to let go someone for cause, that they were seriously concerned about the ethics of this person, there was a serious issue, and you don't want to put this on a public website, that just opens up another can of worms. But at least between the 30-40 odd news organizations, if there is a buyer beware sign on this person, that okay, it's your organization, you can hire whomever you want. No regulator is telling you don't hire this person. But there is a buyer beware sign. This is what this person.
I think that's an interesting idea. But that Adi is an email here. Let's just send an email to, because it's a small community, all of us, right? Send an email. Oh, this guy's done XYZ thing, which kind of is just want you to know before you hire him. And I think one of the funny things about this conversation It's that there's just so many people like that who, we all know of, but they are not, they're still sitting in their cushy jobs. I'm sure the
There's no
proprietors know,
consequences.
the editors know, but there's always some value that they're bringing, which a lot of news organizations, are just turning a blind eye to.
Adi, I'll tell you why. Why I see the fundamental problem with this buyer beware kind of a framework, because many times there could be a case where a publisher or a proprietor, whatever, wants to fire a journalist because they're not listening to what they want
Absolutely.
published. All right. Now, who's going to be the judge in that case? I mean, he's saying that, and there is a way you can always concoct a case. It's very easy to concoct a case against somebody if you want to concoct a case on so many different levels, right? You concoct a case, he's been unethical here. Who's going to be the final judge?
No. So
And
obviously, I mean,
so therefore, to have an independent body to be a final judge in these matters, logistically coming it together and being fair, like a court of, you're saying that let's have a court of law. Let's have judges who will decide, whether you've been
A committee made out of journalists, which all get voted in. They take a third party case.
I find it again. I find it difficult to imagine something like this, just because of the number of ways, a number of conflicts that can emerge, which are nothing to do with your ethics, but just because of different value system or different other reasons. And you can.
And so you're worried it'll become like a retaliation or thing. Even we've had, and we won't get into this, but we've had all the Me Too problems in journalism and all, and come out. The last thing what you want is that, hey, if you don't toe the line of this publication, I will go to this body and get you blacklisted. That's the last thing that we want, right?
Yeah, I mean, you're setting up a new tribunal system, it seems, which is, who's going to fund it? Who's going to run it?
Well, we are talking about all these happy billionaires, right? Who are funding journalism. Maybe we could ask some of them. Many of them are friends. But okay, I'm going to take a step out here and start looking at. I think we've gone a little bit long on this thing. A lot of more audience questions on this. Future of journalism ecosystem. Where we sort of started out. Anant, I'm going to go to you because I know you've done this, and I'm sure the rest will look at it. Microtransactions, rather than selling your entire paper, selling access to one article or two articles, or Anant, I know you've tried this out with specific stories. Love to hear your experience and love to hear the thoughts of everybody on saying, look, maybe we can't sell the entire thing, but can we sell a 1 rupee or a 2 rupee or a 3 rupee article rather than try to sell the whole thing as a very expensive subscription.
You're talking about me or
Anant Nath?
Okay.
Anant Nath.
Yeah. So no, to be honest, we haven't entirely tried the micropayment system model. I mean, Caravan is a paywall. There's only one plan, or the basic plan.
I meant you had a couple of magazines where you are selling it by the article, right? By the story.
Okay, so that was an experiment we were running with News Hunt, back in the day, 4 or 5 years ago, where we were giving them articles, and News Hunt was on its own app, was allowing you to download or buy one article, just buy one article for 2 or 3 rupees. It ran well for like a few months, but then it sort of somehow tanked. And now, in fact, I think we're out of News Hunt now. So micropayments was developing as a fad 2 years ago, but I don't think so it's really picked up. It's not taken off. I think at least publishers that I know of have realized that you sell the entire bundle. If you start selling one article at a time, it may or may not be such a lucrative publishing model. I know in our case, when we were going for Caravan paywall, we really thought about micropayments and saying that, okay, can you buy one article of Caravan, at whatever price, 100 rupees. In the end, the economics of it worked out. At least we took the call of saying, sell a yearly plan and don't give the customers too many options. We just started paywalls on our Hindi websites in the last 3 months. There also, we have the smallest plan that we have is a monthly plan, but then in 1 month you get everything. So it's either a monthly or an annual plan. I'm not too sure about micropayments. I think having a fixed term-based payment framework is probably a better way to go about it. Yeah.
Abhijay, Micro payments, selling small things at a time, works, doesn't work, experiments.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with Anant Nath, because I mean, selling one article is not going to make sense. And to be honest, people just take screenshots of that article and then spread it around in WhatsApp. So it's not a it's not a very sustainable model. I think Anant is right on the fact that the only way it can survive is through monthly or annual plans. And we haven't started exploring that right now, but we will be in 2020. We will explore that concept with one of our websites and then move forward if we find any success.
Anant Goenka, microtransactions, small feeds. By the way, it hasn't mentioned, he also runs stuff like Pharma Express and a few other trade journals, which you forgot to mention in your in your list. But microtransactions in the articles.
Yeah, I think, the broader picture is this. I think, none of us have really figured out how to get a solid, CRM and really understand user data. And I think once we do that, then I think it's all about actually selling. Whether it's micro, whether it's a monthly scheme, whether it's an annual scheme, whatever. That's all secondary. I think the first step is really getting to understand the user. I think once we do that, then we can sort of, do these kind of innovations. I mean, of course, people will take screenshots and they'll share it on WhatsApp. But at some point, we can talk to WhatsApp and say, look, how do we figure out a way for not having this leakage happening? And maybe WhatsApp will say, we can't figure it out. But, I think that's all second step. Today, I've had the opportunity of looking under the hood of the Wall Street Journal's at the DFP, the advertising, the platform that they have built for their advertisers. I think it's actually superior to what Google can offer an advertiser, because they have understood their users so beautifully. They've got registration walls put in at a very early stage, paywalls put in at a subsequent stage to that. They know what each reader, paid reader of the Wall Street Journal, where they're employed, how much they're earning, how many people in the family earn. So I think that's a long journey that we haven't begun to take. I think once we take that journey of understanding the user, then we can experiment with micropayments, flat annual payments, monthly payments. Why can't we bundle and sell? Why can't we talk to, Mother Dairy, Govardhan or whatever, and anybody who's buying a recurring service, a daily recurring service, why can't we partner with them and bundle a digital subscription with a daily, your milk delivery, or, we should be able to sell literally anywhere. Everybody wants and does consume news. We have got so we are coming out with we had our e-paper behind the paywall, which is a replica of the newspaper behind the paywall. We dropped the paywall when Corona happened. So I think literally tomorrow we're going to start selling that the paper subscription again. And we're just doing a flat annual subscription to begin with. But certainly I think it's just getting that user data right first, and then it's about selling something much more than just the product. It's about selling the community. It's about selling the fact that you're being part of something larger. You're actually investing and supporting a very important cause. You're being a responsible citizen. I think those are the kind of things that you have to actually sell. You're not just selling news.
So since you guys have brought it in, I am going to ask the sort of the elephant in the entire ecosystem, right? News aggregators, right? And now we are seeing all of this happening all over the world. Spain has sort of banned Google News. France has sort of put its own moratorium that publishers have to be paid. A lot of angst happening all across. New news aggregators. Apple News Plus, and I'm a subscriber, sort of launched as well. That's saying, hey, we are going to try to fix this the Apple way. But in India, the biggest entrant is going to be a combination of Facebook and Jio, right? Even at the very preliminary level, the micro ambition, and we can talk about the macro ambition, which is especially with fiber to home and taking over the entire broadcast ecosystem. But essentially, you're going to see them as say, look, net neutrality is there. And India had that fight, right? And India won that fight, saying that, look, no, every publisher has to come in front of everybody. You can't do that. But the way around net neutrality is to do something like a Chinese WeChat, where you have an app that is so powerful that everybody spends 90% of their time on that, in effect, creating a walled garden ecosystem where you say that in a daily screen time, if you're spending 2 hours average on screen time, 1.5 hours, 1 hour, 50 minutes will be spent in that walled garden. And then the walled garden chooses who's in, who's out, how much they pay, how much publishers get for their subscriptions. And it also affords a lot of opportunities. I'm seeing a lot of new sort of news channels in the wings coming up, and we'll talk about moats in about 2 minutes' time. Uh, how are you seeing the impact of news aggregators play out? How are you seeing the impact of walled gardens such as Geo play out? Is it an existential threat to everybody who's not going to cut a deal with the aggregators? Starting with Abhijay, and then we'll go around.
I think definitely it's a threat, but a lot of major publications have started moving out of the aggregators, the small ones at least. I mean, like Daily Hunt and, for that matter, Geo News or some other News Hunt, all these aggregators, Alibaba for that, UC News, So a lot of publication, we tried them, we are now moving out of them, and we are preparing for our own subscription models. So eventually, all these people will have to set up their own newsrooms, which is practically impossible at a national level since we are a very big country. I don't see them as a threat in the future. But if you talk about Facebook and Google, yes, definitely they're a big threat. And you know what? Facebook is setting up their own newsroom at a ward level. Which I think is supposed to go live this year or probably Q1 2021. And I think not only they're going to control the flow of information, but as well as what is being created. That is something that is to worry about because, Facebook saw this coming, that in Australia and France, that they have to pay the publishers. So instead of paying the publishers, they're just going to pay the journalists and they're going to have their own newsrooms.
And so you think the aggregators, there's going to be like a competition commission or something that steps in and says, hey, you can't do this. You have to give everybody access to your paywall. This is the equivalent of breaking net neutrality since you're such a big player.
Absolutely.
But then these guys are going to respond and say, you know what, forget it. I'm going to just launch my own news feeds and, pay off the wires, get my own journalism system. Anant Nath, your thoughts?
So I think publishers have a sort of, back and forth relationship with aggregators. There was a time when we were all giving our content freely because we thought this will give us either new customers, revenue and advertising. And then suddenly we realized that, we are giving them the content and we're not getting anything in return. And they're not even getting data on who's reading our content. So people started backing out. And I think there was a phase where some of these aggregators started getting into a licensing model with publishers where they said, okay, fine, we will pay you for content. And then again, therefore publishers were saying, okay, fine, some publishers that we can give you content because you're paying for our content. And I think then again, I think there seems to be some dilution in that model. So I think it's still a evolving relationship. The short story is that most publishers, I think, are realizing that, if you've got content, don't give it out freely to somebody else for them to make money out of it and for them to sort of create a huge leadership without you having any stake in it. And that's probably the emerging consensus. And this, publishers have to work together in this, because if you put up a collective front, your bargaining power is much stronger. I think that's the way it's going to be. I think there was one question about Facebook and Geo. I mean, frankly, we don't know how things will pan out. Definitely something that we all need to be vigilant because it's Facebook, WhatsApp, Instagram, and of course, Geo network all put together. So the stakes are just so high. Not only it's creating a one big mega news serving platform, but it's also the amount of data they will be privy to. I mean, imagine the number of 400 million people who use WhatsApp in India and 300 million people on Reliance Jio, and then I don't know how many million people on Facebook. Just the amount of data that this combined entity can sort of get access to, and what that means for everything. Forget news. I mean, everything else. So that's something that I guess one has to be vigilant and one has to sort of figure out. I think the biggest thing that in India we have done is we've given I think biggest weakness that we have done is we have given free run to Google and Facebook and Amazon to sort of use India as a 1.3 billion people laboratory to get, data. China, of course, has, put huge walls around it. So outside of Europe and America, I mean, we are the biggest testing laboratory for all these tech giants, which is something, I guess,
No, absolutely. I mean, on the laboratory thing, I think Facebook's first entry into mobile payments is going to be India.
Yeah,
and I think then they're going to, and I'm a big fan of the Libra project, but certainly India is going to be the first place where they start real-time payments at scale compared to anybody else. Anant Goenka, you're in the city where a lot of these big decisions are taking place.
I'm in the city, but I'm not in those meetings, so I don't know what to be in the city.
Why aren't you in those meetings?
No, I think, look, I have personally always taken, the view that instead of fighting platforms, we should try to benefit from them. Because I'm just somebody who, I guess, I don't want to be the guy complaining about change. I think the platforms are real. I think the digital world, the whole medium, is that whole digital terrain is you need to have, a Google, an Amazon, a Facebook, arguably, maybe a Microsoft, but you need to have one of these four. Without these four companies, the medium doesn't really work for anybody. I think that's the reality of it, and I think that what's happened, and I could be naive in saying this, but I think what's happened is there's there's a huge trust deficit between global publishers and Silicon Valley for many years. I think that there is a genuine effort and attempt to fix that from Silicon Valley, because they realize that without original content, people investing in original content, authentic original content, their platforms are weakened. The time on site that people spend on their platforms will reduce. Nobody wants to be a place for spam and just for, and just for a casual, sort of content only. I mean, everybody wants that sort of authentic, sort of original content on their platforms. And I think there is a genuine effort to find ways to make that work. Have they found a solution to it? No, they haven't. Have they lived up to all the promises they made to global publishers? No, they haven't. In fact, more than 50%, reading a study recently, my CEO told me about it. More than 50% of the clicks on Google, on the world's largest search engine, are now not leading to outside of Google. So more than 50% of what your search queries on Google are actually result in a page that is inside Google. So you don't, the whole idea, the whole argument earlier that, we're going to just funnel traffic to you, and objectively funnel traffic to the most relevant sort of source, that whole thought has been put on its head, right? Like today, you would come to NDTV, Indian Express, Times of India, whatever, to see an election result. You don't have to do that anymore. Election results are on Google, in Google, on google.com, in the search box, or even if you don't want to search for it, I think they upfront when you go to the news section. Cricket scores are on Google. Weather. They've got food restaurant reviews that are now crowdsourced through Google users. So it's become such a behemoth and a mega platform that really, it's really tough for a user, certainly any other publisher, to exist without working with them. And that was never really the plan, but on the basis of user experience and usability, they've done this. I think the pushback that's come from publishers has been quite unanimous. And I think that you've seen that Google has agreed to pay for content. I don't know the mechanics of how they're going to do it, but they've agreed to pay for content now in Spain, in France, and in Australia. And they've done this in these three countries because the industry, the publishers, have actually come together and have strongly come together. I think in India, what happens is it's a small community, but we don't talk together enough. And we should all sort of put our foot down and say this is not going to, this doesn't really work. And I'm sure that they will also want to come up with a solution that does work for the entire ecosystem. I think Apple News, I think this realization that they need to find a way that the ecosystem survives and is sustainable on its own
I think this realization is it's not a noble one. I think it's come because they were forced to realize this, because I think they've tried, experimented, and come to recognize that news is hard. News is very difficult. And I don't think that, a tech culture company has so far been able to really come and, get original reporting right. I mean, Apple News has, launched and failed arguably 2 times already. And I think the fact that Apple News has launched and failed 2 times already is great news for us. For us, for the old school 85-year-old companies investing in original content, the fact that Apple hasn't been able to get it right yet is great news for us. I do think that we have to just represent ourselves better to Silicon Valley, and I think there is a genuine interest and effort to try to make this kind of work in a more sustainable fashion.
Speaking about Silicon Valley, one of the big things that we've seen which in my opinion has been extremely surprising is the depth and level of machine learning tools. And, I don't like to use the word AI, but, people do. So AI in creating content. Certainly, we've seen a lot of experiments in 3 to 5 years, which have suddenly become, shockingly accurate, particularly in reporting financial news, summarizing reports, even, creating threadbare articles. What are you all seeing in terms of these automatic story generation platforms? Where are they? And at what point in the future do you think that they're going to be robust enough that they could supplement at least an initial feed? Obviously, the desk has to then clean it up and, stylistically do it. Do you see that playing a large role? Anant Goenka, if you want to start, and then we'll go to...
I think more evolved, I think in America, certainly you've seen this, right? Like why, that they've got really sophisticated systems, talking about stock market movements, as you rightly said, talking about any live sporting events, scorecard. And there's so many other things. And I don't think anybody in India, the honest truth, I think anybody in India has invested in that kind of tech skilling internally. No one, not even the largest.
License it out from them. I mean, so for example, I mean, I've looked at a couple of these platforms. I've tested them out, and I won't name names, but some of them in terms of just generate, like I need 10 stories on this subject. I plug it in, and they scour the internet, run algorithms on trust basis. Who are the trusted sources? Who's not? And they come out with a reasonably good story that, let's say, a junior reporter would have done anyway.
Yeah, and I think that's the future. I think the journalists should therefore specialize in domain expertise, and their job has to be value add to the commoditized story that everybody's got. And if a Wire doesn't have it, a robot sort of built it. Associated Press has done incredible work in terms of finding ways to automate very commoditized content. And again, I've had the opportunity of going and looking at sort of how they've done that. Reuters has done incredible work in this, more than anybody else. Actually, Reuters has been to me the leader in this whole exercise. So our job really has to be to value add on the kind of content that a bot can do, and there's a lot that the bot can do. And I would welcome it, but just right now, what's happened in India, I did want to tell you, in this particular situation, no amount of license fees, if it's in dollars, will be justified to do this, because the amount of user consumption that has exploded in the last 2 months, post Geo last year, and then the last 2 months after COVID. The inventory that's been available, the ad inventory, that's just the amount of ad inventory available, the rates have a lot of pressure on ad rates. So to invest in a licensed software in dollars or in euros that will create original content and then make money out of that arbitrage, I don't think would work, at least not for a long time.
So the cost of content creators right now in India is still cheap enough that an overpriced bot doesn't make sense. But at some point, at economies of scale,
100%.
When those become cheaper. Anant Nath, bots writing your, or at least feeding the first draft of a magazine?
So, I mean, to be honest, my knowledge is slightly limited in this aspect, but to the best of my understanding, this can at best be secondary writing. I mean, at the end, the fundamentals, the first step is to get original reporting done, and then how the reporting is packaged into an article is something that maybe where an AI driven or a bot driven system can sort of interfere. But to get original reporting done, to get original facts, from on ground, from your sources. I mean, those are the original reportage is something a bot cannot. I mean, it's just not possible for it to replace. So we're primarily talking about packaging of the content, which is sure. I mean, let's say if you're running a magazine or a newspaper in a language and you want that content to be available in 10 different languages, then obviously you already have Google Translate, but you can create a more higher evolved bot driven system that can translate the content. But somebody has to go and get the original content out, original information, package it together with the help of, it has to be in human element, and then create something, and then further dissemination of the article into multiple formats. Sure, why not? I mean, those could.
Anand, your voice quality is a little bit cracking. I just have a look at your net connection. Abhijay, I know you are a super fan of putting everything into processes, right? All your stuff is very well defined into, a very beautiful stuff. When will AI start playing a role, and where do you think? And again, learning more than AI, to be honest.
And Abhijay, if that's true, I'm going to I need you to help me with consulting. I'm going to ask you for a consulting contract.
I'll take a brokerage fee. Brokerage fee.
He's my guide myself, So I think AI is there for the English medium, but it's very difficult to train AI in terms of to create content. I mean, we are definitely using machine learning in terms of serving related content. We are using machine learning to serve recommended content, but that's about it. I mean, if we are like a long way from creating content, specifically in vernacular languages. It's already out there for English, but since we are not, English news organization, I don't think we'll be seeing any kind of development on that front for another year or 2 years.
You know what I love about it? It's like, oh, it'll never happen. A year or 2 years.
Anant Goenka said, right, because there's not much money because of a huge influx of ad inventories because of geo and post-COVID, the rates have gone down per CPM. And, for us, average revenue per user per month is about $1, which is absolutely nothing to fund such technologies, so unless and until, we have a huge influx of money, maybe funding by billionaire to invest in our news organization, maybe it's a possibility then. But as of now, I think conservation of the resources is the most valuable thing that we need to do right now.
But do you see a future, for example, as Anant Nath said, that that you might have a bot that brings it out in English, and Absolutely. Then you have an advanced translator or something that then brings it into the vernacular, and so Absolutely. You have the content generation and accumulation happening in English, because that's where the technology investments are happening. But then you just have the literature.
I mean, for example, I'll just give you a small example. I mean, I want to read what is happening in Mexico, but I do not want to consume from their English websites or English news organizations. I actually want to read what is being written down in Mexican, right? Or Spanish, sorry. And for that matter, if that is automatically translated into English, that is something what I want to know, So there's a huge demand. For example, if something is being written down in German or French, and it automatically gets translated into Hindi, my reader who wants to know what is happening in France is being served to him, right? So I think there's a huge scope for that eventually, but not. I don't see it in the short term, but definitely it's a big thing in the long term.
I'm going to go to the other elephant in the ecosystem. Unlike a lot of other countries, India really hasn't had an M&A culture in our ecosystem right now, right? We have a sprawl of news organizations, sprawl of brands, sprawl of mastheads, and we really haven't seen that level of, if anything else, we've seen more splits rather than mergers. we've seen individuals change ownership. We've seen new channels being launched from different people. We've seen new newspapers being launched by former editors or former people, making it even a more segmented, bifurcated world. Why aren't we seeing M&A? And when will we see M&A? I mean, obviously the economic sector. Anant Goenka, do you want to start there?
Adi, you're really asking great questions here. I feel like...
Are you surprised?
This is so true, I really feel this is something which, I always wonder that, if you see your company sliding, you see revenues declining, you see circulation declining, why don't you just sell? Why don't we, nobody takes that conversation. And then I look inwards and I say that what circumstance would I ever sell? And I'm like, yeah, I would never want to. And I don't know what it is. Is it just, this idea that the amount, that we're just so attached to the power of being in the news industry that we just can't imagine life without it? Are we, is it just that why only news in every industry? I feel in India, the idea of selling is looked down upon, for a businessman to sell his business is just not, it's considered, it's considered being a failure. It's looked down on. Nobody really congratulates you when you sell business, and especially the news industry. These are companies that have been built over hundreds of years. So I think it's just maybe pride, maybe ego, but it's something soft. It's something soft like that that in my view actually prevents M&As in our industry. And I do think the industry is ready for serious consolidation. I see so many people saying we'll shut down but we won't sell, and I kind of understand that, but I don't think that's good for the industry. I think for an industry to thrive, bad business models must fail fast. And here we just keep getting egos to keep funding bad business models in the news industry, or we just kind of allow it to slide and just hamper the business of the entire industry. Raising costs and keeping revenues down, undercutting each other with advertisers. But we don't, we're not doing it with any real sort of light in the tunnel. So it's a great question, and there isn't a good answer for it.
Anant Nath, why isn't there an M&A investment bank running around trying to make sure these deals happen? Why aren't people selling? Why aren't people buying? What's the issue?
No, see, there was a phase, right? When between 2007 and 14, where a lot of publishing houses went public. So, in that sense, they opened up the ownership to somebody outside, whether to a private equity firm or they listed themselves. So there was a phase. I think what has not happened is that.
But those were and there are examples in the last 2-3 years, right, where they have changed ownership, but we haven't seen buying out or merging as much.
Yeah. So I was getting to that. So basically, Jagran, Bhaskar, these are big companies which went public. Amar Ujala has D. Sean, as a significant shareholder. So these are huge companies for sure. But yeah, you're right. Nobody has completely given up ownership. There are very few and far instances of somebody completely giving up ownership. And maybe, there's one answer is because even though your newspaper or whatever media, news media, primarily news media I'm talking about, may not be making money, but it may end up, helping you in something else. You might have some other interest.
It is a bit bad, but so we heard the last statement.
Yeah, maybe it's better now. So maybe there's something else which is in a different field where you can use the power of your newspaper and get some other leverage. So that's the reality that is there in India, as much as it might be there in other parts of the world. But definitely it's a much bigger reality in India than I would say in much of at least the Western construct of media. So that is probably a reason. In some cases it's also because you're just so emotionally attached to the publication. You're born into it. You're emotionally attached. I can speak for myself. You're just so emotionally attached, and I think that's what Anant was trying to say, that there is a certain emotional attachment there, and so emotions do play an important part there.
I also think that there isn't one big consolidator who's emerged yet, because I feel like if there was once really successful, bet on, bet your house on it kind of business model out there, then that person could pay premium to sort of make acquisitions. But when if a Times of India would ever consider buying something, they would always compare a build versus buy, and then they'll say, we build it ourselves. We don't need to go into this buying conversation. The guys who are selling it anyway are so indecisive. There's so many, how many cousins involved. So I think the execution of any such deal actually is, if you go to think about it, is really quite painstaking. And who's going to buy it?
And if I may, sorry, I mean, it's no different even in big newspaper publishing houses out in West. I mean, for Rupert Murdoch to buy Wall Street Journal was, he had to play games with within the family, because not everybody wanted to sell it out. I mean, they saw it as part of a certain trust that they've been given, and it's sort of more of a society. I mean, there's a certain trust quotient attached there to your newspaper. So media as a business where it's not like any other business which you can be so emotionally detached to. You end up sort of building an emotional attachment to it, and also in many cases, a certain sense of social, social responsibility.
Yeah, I know Abhijay's turn to answer, but I'll just quickly just add one. No, I think in America, a lot of consolidation is happening. I remember under this company that they finally called Tronc.
Yeah. And you remember their breakout announcement? And now it's become
I mean, Los Angeles Times sold like 5 times, in like 10 years. I don't know, America, but the consolidation it's not like it hasn't happened.
No, it's a huge amount of consolidation that's happened in the US. I mean, who's buying, selling, PE, everything else. And I mean, we should have seen the same in India, but what I'm seeing is there is a lot of issues there that we have to look at. And I think this side vanity play is what sort of, subsidizing a lot of papers that should have gone bust. They are getting revenues due to some strategic reason rather than from a pure business play. Abhijay, your thoughts? Sorry, we sort of left you.
I mean, I'm not a very good, I don't have much idea on that topic, but I think both the Anants have covered it pretty well. I think a lot of Indian media organizations are owned by families, and families, when there are too many stakeholders in a single organization, it is impossible to sell. Then there is the public shaming factor. Oh, Lala ji ne ji business bech diya, kaam theek nahi chal raha tha. That public shaming is something Indians are really scared of, and which keeps them away from selling, even though they have sold the entire thing at a profit. And then the third, like Anant Goenka said, that the entire sheer fact that we are born into journalism, it's part of our blood, it's part of our DNA. That really kind of prevents us from selling our organizations and letting other people come in. And I think I know a couple of organizations who wanted some investment, but they were not willing to give up their control in editorial sense, and the buyers wanted to have a say in their editorial calls. So this specific clause really kind of prevents M&As in India.
You guys, I just noticed we've gone to like 2 hours and some minutes. So, and thank you for our attendees for hanging out throughout this spot. I know all of you are busy, and you have newspapers and magazines to come out late night tonight. So I'd just love to get a couple of closing statements, and, specifically doing a lot of, addressing a lot of audience questions on, all of us are struggling with no print newspapers showing up to doors, people not even picking up print newspapers, thinking they're going to get COVID, and a whole bunch of stuff around that. We've looked at print moving to digital. So if you have a couple of minutes to summarize your thoughts on, the futures of journalism and the journalistic model post COVID-19 in specific, would love to start with Anant Nath, and we'll end with Anant Goenka.
I was just looking at some questions, that are being posed here. And one of them, of course, is again, this question about will subscription model lead to better quality of journalism? And sort of that ties up with, the post-COVID model that we've talked about, that yes, of course, a better subscription model will force us is intimately tied up with better quality of journalism. And COVID, the pandemic, I mean, Arundhati Roy, I know she's, people have, she evokes different kinds of views on both sides, but she wrote a very interesting article will the pandemic be, a portal, to reimagine the world that, I mean, and she wrote, of course, wrote in from a very societal and a social perspective, but even for newspapers, I think this could be a portal. This could very well be a portal where we reimagine a publishing model, because the other big concerns a lot of people are thinking about is whether people will go back to physical newspapers and magazines. Whether, for almost a month and a half, if you don't have had access to a physical paper or a physical magazine, will you go back to it? And these are fundamental questions that we'll all have to sort of figure out. If they don't, then, what is our digital model? And then again, digital model will be primarily dependent on subscriptions, lesser dependent on advertising. So in many ways, it will force us to relook at something that we were taking for granted. One of the big things that publishing in India has been taken for granted is reliance on, a lot of government advertising. And government uses the huge amount of money that they spend in media they can use these means to sort of leverage, to sort of contain you. And there are instances where it's more so at the state level, not so much. I mean, it could happen at the national level as well, but at the state level as well, where the chief minister, could expect a certain quid pro quo, and it becomes it becomes difficult if you are a publisher at that time, where anyway your publishing is not making money and your government is a big source of revenue. One fine day you can't say no, I will not take government advertising. I mean, it's something that has taken decades to build. It's built organically. Today, you can't just suddenly abandon a major source of revenue, no matter how noble your intentions might be. So the COVID will sort of hopefully force us to look at these fundamental questions on relying greater on direct reader revenues. For magazines, for example, at least newspapers are able to print and distribute newspapers in their cities, wherever the newspaper centers are. Express from Delhi or Bombay, and Punjab cases from various centers in Punjab. We are not printing any magazines, because how do you sort of distribute those magazines across territories, across railway stations, because there are no trains running? So therefore, the onus is more on even magazines to sort of figure out how do you get direct reader subscriptions, whether for physical or for digital, lower reliance on advertising, give your customers a more meaningful content.
Abhijay, your final thoughts, the journalism ecosystem model, everything post COVID-19?
I think it's all moving towards digital, which we have been expecting. And it has been a very, very rough path for journalists and a lot of news organizations. But I think it'll make it through. There'll be a lot of changes. There'll be a lot of reformation and formation. I think maybe this is a reset button for every single organization. And after the reboot, I think it'll hopefully emerge as a victor, So, all the questions that we have discussed, all the things that we have discussed are very crucial to the news fraternity. And hopefully someone finds a good solution, or otherwise, we might be in a grim state. So that's about it. I don't want to be very pessimistic.
Trying to keep calm and carry on. Anant Goenka, first, thank you for sending me the WhatsApp paper every morning. Deeply appreciate it. Is that the future? The e-paper sent.
Why not? Right? Like, and that's what I mean by trying to work with platforms, right? Like, I mean, can you imagine if we found a way to sell the, an e-replica of the newspaper on WhatsApp to a distribution channel and actually like charge money from a WhatsApp payment? I mean, I'm just like, why don't we think down that path rather than like fighting it and saying WhatsApp and data? And, I'm just, I would rather try to benefit from that explosion of audience than to kind of, fight that trend. But that's just me, I guess. But no, I think, look, I think the onus is tremendously on audiences now to recognize that there is a lot of investment and time and effort that goes into original authentic content. And I think that that's one big, audience shift, which I must say, starting with Apple iTunes back in the day, to now a Netflix or a Hotstar or, even arguably Spotify. These are all, people are getting used to paying for content. I think people will start paying for news content as well. And I think the other big piece that we didn't talk too much about is that, advertising on digital has been reduced a lot to performance advertising, which is actually just sales. So all digital advertising is now being computed on, how many leads did you get me? How many cars went for a test drive with my ad on a digital platform? Or how many, I don't know, I guess from a university perspective, how many, seats did I fill, whatever your metric is. Advertising is not sales. Advertising is promotion. The objective of advertising is to build a emotive relationship between the customer, potential customer, or real customer, and your brand. And I think that is something, and I'm very involved with the digital advertising committee, the digital advertising community. I think that's something that all the digital advertising agencies and the chief marketing officers also have realized, that brand building, which was earlier the domain only of legacy media, television and print, now has to also shift to digital. And what happens with that is that you realize that putting an ad on santabanta.com or xyz.com cannot be priced the same way as putting an ad on Indian Express, Punjab, Kesari, Caravan. And I think that this responsibility and this realization comes on publishers to say, look, you have premium audience, you have premium inventory, you have to get your pricing right. There's no reason, I tell you why it's such an imperialistic thought to say that an ad on Punjab Kesari through programmatic buying route is, available at half the price of an ad on Times of India. Why? Just because a guy prefers to read in Hindi doesn't mean he doesn't have, he's not a potential, customer for your car or your jewelry or your phone or whatever you're selling. And if you compare it to evolved markets, you compare it to New York, the New York Times, it will be virtually impossible for you to get an ad on the New York Times homepage for less than $15 CPM. Virtually impossible, no matter whether it's direct or programmatic. In India, we're pushing rates down to less than 100 rupees CPM. I mean, why are we doing this to ourselves, right? So I think that the agency are also realizing this. There's nobody's winning from this. So I think both sides, right? I don't think that the answer to all our solutions is just reader revenue and then we're done with it. I think advertising will remain a big part of our revenue stream. We have to sell responsibly. We have to sell thinking long term. I know it's easier said than done, but I think that's crucial. And also then is the reader revenue piece. I think it will be a combination of both, and I think that's kind of. I feel I'm not that pessimistic. I do think that if we're honest to ourselves and what we do, I do think there'll be an audience that will be there to pay for it.
Thank you so much, guys. I wish I hadn't had another hour with you. We have just sort of, I feel like we've just scratched the surface. We have another 30 questions, everything about discussing winner takes all, a lot more business models to look at. But, I'm super grateful for all of you to be here. Silver lining again of COVID-19 that I can get everybody at least in a Zoom room. I look forward to meeting everyone in person. Thank you so much for all our attendees who stayed with us for almost, I think, 2 hours, 15 minutes so far and such. I have posted on the chat, which is the link to all CII webinars. We also have a Telegram channel, as well as 2 WhatsApp admin post-only groups, which you can subscribe to, where we'll post updates on webinars, follow-up information that we might get from our panelists, stuff of interest. And with that, I just wish everybody a very good evening. Please stay safe, stay positive, and Jai Hind. Thank you.